Gary entered his bathroom one bright morning, rubbing the sleep from his eyes. The sunlight streamed through the blinds, casting a warm, golden glow across the room. As he stepped onto the carpet, something shimmered, catching his eye. He squinted down, curious and cautious. The glint had come from a tiny circle of foil, nestled almost invisibly against the beige carpet. His heart skipped a beat. He knelt to examine it more closely. "What's this?" Gary murmured, picking up the foil. He recognized it immediately, the backing of a birth control pill strip. His brow furrowed in confusion. Caroline hadn't mentioned dropping anything, and besides, they hadn't used birth control since his vasectomy 2 years ago. He stood up, the foil circle pinched between his fingers, staring at it as if it might reveal its secrets. "Caroline," he called out. But there was no response. She was still asleep, the house quiet except for the faint hum of the refrigerator and the chirping of birds outside. Gary's mind raced. Why would there be a birth control pill in their bathroom? Determined to find answers, Gary carefully placed the foil piece on the counter and began searching the bathroom. He opened the medicine cabinet, checked the drawers, and looked behind the shower curtain. Nothing seemed out of place. Then, as he was about to give up, he noticed something in the trash can, a strip of pills, with one of the circles missing. His stomach churned as he pulled it out. It was indeed a birth control strip, with Tuesday's pill missing. The realization hit him like a punch to the gut. Caroline was taking birth control pills again. But why? Gary's thoughts spiraled. They had decided 2 children were enough, hence his vasectomy. Caroline had always been straightforward about her preferences, and they had shared the results of their recent physicals, both showing them to be in perfect health. So why would she need to take birth control pills? The possible answers made his heart pound painfully in his chest. Feeling a mix of anger, fear, and betrayal, Gary knew he needed more information before jumping to conclusions. He couldn't confront Caroline without proof. He would have to investigate further. The next day, after Caroline had left for work and the children were at school, Gary went to the electronics store. He bought small cameras, voice recorders, and a phone cloning device. His hands trembled as he handed over his credit card, the gravity of his actions weighing heavily on him. Back at home, he installed the cameras discreetly in the bathroom, living room, and bedroom. He felt a pang of guilt, but his need for answers overpowered it. He cloned Caroline's phone, hoping to uncover anything that might explain her behavior. As he went through her messages and emails, Gary's heart sank further. There were no incriminating messages, no obvious signs of infidelity. Caroline's digital life seemed normal, almost too normal. But Gary was nothing if not thorough. He checked every corner of the house, looking for any hidden secrets. It was in the bedroom, while searching through the closet, that he found it. Behind a pile of old clothes, near the ventilation duct, was a second phone. His breath caught in his throat. This was it. This was the proof he needed. Gary sat on the bed, staring at the phone in his hand. His mind buzzed with 1,000 thoughts. Who was she talking to? How long had this been going on? He felt a surge of determination. He would find out the truth, no matter how much it hurt. Gary waited until Caroline had left for work the next morning before turning on the second phone. His hands shook as he navigated to the messages. The screen lit up with a series of texts between Caroline and someone saved as B. His heart pounded in his chest as he began to read. Missed you today. Can't wait to see you tonight, one message read. Another followed, same here. I'll bring the wine. Gary's blood ran cold. His worst fears were being confirmed right in front of him. B wasn't just a friend or colleague, this was someone Caroline was intimately involved with. The texts were filled with details only a lover would know, references to their time together, pet names and plans for future meetings. Gary scrolled through the messages, feeling a mixture of anger and heartbreak. He couldn't believe this was happening. Caroline, the woman he had trusted and loved for 9 years, was cheating on him. And not just with anyone, but with Bill Wright, her boss. The realization hit him like a freight train. He had met Bill several times at company events, never suspecting anything. He needed more concrete proof. The texts were damning, but he wanted irrefutable evidence. That night, as Caroline slept, Gary quietly retrieved one of the hidden cameras from the bathroom. He reviewed the footage, his heart sinking with each passing second. There on the screen was Caroline texting Bill. The timestamp matched the messages he had read earlier. She looked so casual, so at ease. It was as if she had done this 100 times before. His gut twisted in pain and betrayal. The following day, Gary decided to collect DNA samples from himself, James and Sonia. He did it covertly, while tucking them into bed, swabbing the inside of their cheeks with a Q-tip. His heart ached as he looked at their innocent faces. He loved them so much. But now, he couldn't shake the nagging doubt, were they even his? He sent the samples to a lab, anxiously awaiting the results. Each day felt like an eternity. He threw himself into work, trying to distract himself from the turmoil at home. Michelle, his secretary, noticed his distraction. "Gary, you don't look well." "Everything okay?" she asked one afternoon. Gary sighed, running a hand through his hair. "No, Michelle, everything's not okay. But I can't talk about it right now." She nodded, concern etched on her face. "If you need anything, you know where to find me." Finally, the email from the lab arrived. Gary's hands shook as he opened it, his heart pounding. The results confirmed his worst fears. Neither James nor Sonia were biologically his. They were both Bill Wright's children. Gary felt the world tilt on its axis. The pain was unbearable, a mix of betrayal, anger, and profound sadness. He loved those children as if they were his own, but now he knew the truth. Caroline had deceived him for years, robbing him of his peace and his trust. He knew he couldn't keep this to himself any longer. It was time to confront Caroline and take control of the situation. Gary sat at the kitchen table, staring blankly at the DNA results on his laptop screen. His mind was a whirlwind of emotions. He loved James and Sonia deeply, but now, knowing they were not his biological children, everything felt tainted by Caroline's betrayal. He clenched his fists, feeling a surge of anger and heartbreak. He needed to talk to someone, to find a way to navigate this storm of emotions. Gary's secretary, Michelle, had always been a steady presence in his life. He decided to confide in her, hoping she might offer some clarity. The next day at the office, he asked her to join him for a coffee break in a small, private conference room. "Michelle, I need to talk to you about something personal," Gary began, his voice trembling. Michelle looked at him with concern. "Of course, Gary. What's going on?" Gary took a deep breath and recounted everything: the birth control pills, the hidden phone, the DNA results. As he spoke, Michelle listened intently, her expression shifting from concern to anger on his behalf. "I can't believe she did this to you," Michelle said, her voice steady but filled with empathy. "You need to protect yourself and your assets. Have you thought about consulting a lawyer?" Gary nodded. "I have. I met with Lorraine, a divorce lawyer, and Brian Spencer, our company's lawyer. They've been helping me come up with a plan to protect my assets and deal with this situation." Michelle leaned forward, her eyes filled with determination. "Good. You need to stay strong, Gary. This is going to be a tough battle, but you have to protect yourself and ensure Caroline doesn't take everything you've worked so hard for." Gary felt a flicker of hope. Michelle's support gave him the strength he needed. "Thank you, Michelle. I don't know what I'd do without you." Over the next few days, Gary and his lawyers devised a comprehensive plan. They decided to restructure his finances, tying everything to the company and making it untouchable in the divorce. Gary used all his savings, his $401,000, and even took out a loan from the company's pension fund to buy out one of his business partners. This move ensured that Caroline would have no claim over his business assets. Lorraine also suggested a legal strategy to sue Bill's company for violating their anti-fraternization policy. The goal was to ensure Caroline received minimal financial support, making it clear that her actions had severe consequences. Finally, the day arrived for the confrontation. Lorraine had the divorce papers ready, and Gary was prepared for the emotional storm that was about to hit. Caroline came home from work, unsuspecting of the impending confrontation. Gary waited in the living room, his heart pounding. "Gary, what's going on? You sounded so serious on the phone," Caroline said as she walked in, her face etched with concern. Gary took a deep breath, feeling a mix of anger and sorrow. "Caroline, we need to talk." She sat down, looking at him with confusion. "What is it?" Gary handed her the divorce papers. "I know about the birth control pills, the hidden phone, and the DNA results. James and Sonia are not my children. You've been cheating on me with Bill Wright for years." Caroline's face turned pale, and tears welled up in her eyes. "Gary, I can explain." "No," Gary interrupted, his voice firm. "I don't want to hear your excuses. This marriage is over. You need to pack your things and leave." Caroline sobbed, realizing the gravity of the situation. "Please, Gary, we can work this out." "Get out, Caroline," Gary said, his voice breaking. "Just go." As Caroline packed her belongings, Gary called the AO pair into the room. "You're fired. I know you were complicit in this affair. Leave now." The pair looked shocked but didn't argue. She quickly gathered her things and left the house. Gary watched as Caroline and the AO pair left the house, feeling a hollow sense of finality. He had loved Caroline deeply and cherished their family life, but now everything was shattered. The silence in the house was deafening as he sat alone, trying to process the whirlwind of emotions. The next morning, Gary moved into Michelle's spare room, seeking refuge from the memories that haunted his home. Michelle's kindness and support were a balm to his wounded heart. She maintained a professional demeanor at work, but at home she was a steady source of comfort. "Are you sure you're okay?" Michelle asked one evening as they sat in her living room, the glow of the fireplace casting a warm light. Gary sighed, staring into the flames. "I don't know. Everything feels surreal. One moment I had a family, and the next, it's all gone." Michelle reached out, placing a comforting hand on his. "You're strong, Gary. You'll get through this, and you're not alone." Gary looked at her, feeling a surge of gratitude. "Thank you, Michelle. I really don't know what I'd do without you." A few days later, they met with Lorraine to finalize the next steps. Lorraine was pleased with the progress and had already filed the lawsuit against Bill's company for violating the anti-fraternization policy. The evidence Gary had gathered was overwhelming, and the company couldn't afford to fight it. "We've made significant headway," Lorraine said, a satisfied smile on her face. "Bill's company has agreed to settle for $750,000 payable after the divorce is finalized. Caroline will receive minimal financial support, just as we planned." Gary nodded, feeling a sense of accomplishment. "What about Bill?" he asked. Lorraine's smile widened. "We're suing him for alienation of affection and for all the expenses you incurred believing those children were yours. He won't know what hit him." The day of the confrontation with Bill's lawyers arrived. Gary, Lorraine, and Michelle walked into the office, ready to face Bill and his legal team. Bill's smug demeanor vanished as Lorraine laid out the evidence against him. The texts, the videos, the DNA results, everything was irrefutable. Bill's lawyer looked defeated. "What do you want?" he asked. Lorraine leaned forward, her voice cold and determined. $500,000. Immediately." Bill's face turned red with anger, but he knew he had no choice. He agreed to the settlement, and Gary left the office feeling a weight lift off his shoulders. He now had enough money to repay the pension fund loan and still have some left over. The final meeting of the day was with Caroline's lawyers. Caroline was there, looking pale and exhausted. She didn't meet Gary's eyes as they sat down. Lorraine took the lead, presenting the evidence and the terms of the divorce. "Your client has no grounds for contesting this divorce," Lorraine said firmly. "Given the prenuptial agreement and the evidence of infidelity, Gary retains his business assets. Caroline will receive half of the joint account balance and must vacate the marital home immediately." Caroline's lawyer looked at the papers, then at Caroline, who nodded silently. She signed the documents, tears streaming down her face. "Gary, please," she began. But Gary cut her off. "There's nothing left to say, Caroline. This is over." Caroline left the office without another word, and Gary felt a bittersweet relief wash over him. He was free, but the scars of betrayal remained. Over the next few weeks, Gary finalized the sale of the house and repaid his debts. He continued living with Michelle, who was an unwavering source of support. One evening, as they sat together, Michelle finally revealed her feelings. Gary, I've cared about you for a long time, she said softly, looking into his eyes. I know this is a difficult time, but I want you to know that I'm here for you, not just as a friend or colleague, but as someone who truly cares. Gary was taken aback but touched. He had always respected and admired Michelle, but now he realized he had developed deeper feelings for her too. Michelle, you've been my rock through all of this. I don't know what the future holds, but I'd like to find out with you. Michelle smiled, her eyes sparkling with hope. I'd like that too, Gary, one step at a time. The days turned into weeks, and Gary found solace in the routine of his new life. Living with Michelle brought a sense of stability he hadn't felt in months. They fell into a comfortable rhythm, sharing meals, discussing work, and gradually their relationship began to blossom. One evening, as they sat on the couch watching a movie, Michelle turned to Gary with a serious expression. Gary, I've been thinking a lot about us. I know it's still early, but I want to be honest with you about my feelings. Gary muted the TV and faced her, his heart racing. I'm listening. Michelle took a deep breath. I've cared about you for so long, and these past few weeks have only made those feelings stronger. I know you're still healing, but I want to be here for you in every way. I love you, Gary. Gary's eyes welled up with tears. He reached out and took Michelle's hand, squeezing it gently. I love you too, Michelle. You've been my anchor through this storm. I'm ready to start a new chapter with you. They kissed, sealing their commitment to one another. It was a tender, hopeful moment that marked the beginning of their new life together. One day at work, Michelle knocked on Gary's office door with a somber expression. Gary, I just got some news. Bill Wright is dead. Gary felt a jolt of surprise. What? How? Michelle sat down, her voice steady. Apparently, Stephanie caught him with Caroline again. She shot him in a fit of rage. Gary leaned back in his chair, processing the news. Despite everything, he couldn't muster any sympathy for Bill. Nothing could have happened to a nicer guy, he said with a wry smile. Michelle laughed softly. I thought you might feel that way. Later that day, an official envelope arrived for Gary. He opened it to find the final divorce decree. He was officially free. Gary let out a long breath, feeling a weight lift off his shoulders. He was finally free from the chains of his past. Michelle entered his office just as he was putting the papers away. She noticed the look of relief on his face. Good news, she asked. Gary nodded, a smile spreading across his face. Yes, I'm finally a free man. Without hesitation, Michelle stepped forward and kissed him passionately. It was a kiss filled with promise and the start of a new beginning. I've been waiting for this moment, she whispered, her eyes shining with love. Now we can really start our life together. Gary felt a surge of emotion. I can't wait, Michelle. You've been my rock, and I want to build a future with you. As the days passed, Gary and Michelle's relationship grew stronger. They talked about their dreams and plans for the future, including the possibility of starting a family. Gary scheduled an appointment with his doctor to discuss a vasectomy reversal, feeling hopeful for the first time in months. During the consultation, Dr. Harrington explained the procedure and the high success rate for reversals done within a few years of the original surgery. There's a 95% chance you'll be able to father children again, the doctor said reassuringly. Gary felt tears of relief welling up. Thank you, doctor. This means everything to me. Michelle, who had accompanied him, squeezed his hand. We have a chance, Gary. We can have our own family. Gary smiled through his tears. Yes, we can, and I couldn't ask for a better partner to share this journey with. Gary and Michelle stood outside the doctor's office, the cool breeze brushing against their faces. Gary felt a renewed sense of hope and purpose. The possibility of starting a family with Michelle filled him with a joy he hadn't felt in years. We can do this, Michelle said, her eyes gleaming with excitement. Gary nodded, feeling a surge of affection for the woman who had stood by him through his darkest times. We can. And I'm so grateful to have you by my side. The days leading up to the vasectomy reversal were filled with anticipation and planning. Michelle took care of every detail, ensuring that Gary was comfortable and ready for the procedure. Her unwavering support and love made the journey seem less daunting. The morning of the surgery, Michelle drove Gary to the hospital. The air was thick with a mixture of nerves and hope. Gary's heart raced as they walked through the sterile corridors, but Michelle's presence was a calming force. "Everything's going to be fine," she reassured him, squeezing his hand. Gary smiled weakly. "I know. Thanks to you." The surgery went smoothly. When Gary woke up in the recovery room, Michelle was there, holding his hand and smiling down at him. "How do you feel?" she asked softly. "A bit groggy, but okay," Gary replied, his voice hoarse. "The doctor said it went perfectly. We should be able to start trying for a baby in a few months," Michelle said, her eyes sparkling with excitement. Gary felt a wave of relief wash over him. That's great news. The recovery period was a time of healing and bonding for Gary and Michelle. They spent quiet evenings together, talking about their future and the family they hoped to build. Michelle's optimism was infectious, lifting Gary's spirits and filling him with hope. One evening, as they sat on the couch with a blanket wrapped around them, Michelle looked at Gary with a serious expression. "I've been thinking a lot about our future. I want you to know that no matter what happens, I'm here for you. Whether we have children or not, you're the most important person in my life." Gary's heart swelled with love and gratitude. "Thank you, Michelle. I feel the same way. You've been my rock, and I can't imagine my life without you." They shared a tender kiss, solidifying their commitment to one another. Gary knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. As the months passed, Gary's strength returned, and he and Michelle began the process of trying for a baby. The journey was filled with hope and anticipation, but also moments of doubt and anxiety. Through it all, Michelle remained a pillar of support, encouraging Gary and keeping their spirits high. One sunny afternoon, Michelle came home from work with a small, wrapped package in her hands. "I have a surprise for you," she said, her eyes twinkling. Gary raised an eyebrow. "What is it?" "Open it and see," Michelle replied, handing him the package. Gary unwrapped the gift, revealing a pair of tiny, knitted booties. His eyes widened with surprise and joy. "Does this mean?" Michelle nodded, tears of happiness streaming down her cheeks. "Yes, Gary, we're going to have a baby." Gary felt a rush of emotions: joy, excitement, and overwhelming love for the woman who had given him a second chance at happiness. He pulled Michelle into his arms, holding her close as they both cried tears of joy. "We did it," he whispered. "We're going to be parents." The months that followed were a whirlwind of preparations and celebrations. Gary and Michelle attended prenatal appointments together, decorated the nursery, and shared their excitement with friends and family. The news of their pregnancy was a beacon of hope, a testament to their resilience and love. Gary's life had been turned upside down by betrayal and heartache, but with Michelle by his side, he had found the strength to rebuild and move forward. Their love had not only survived the storm but had grown stronger, giving them the foundation to build a new life together. As they stood in the nursery, looking at the crib they had just assembled, Gary felt a deep sense of peace and fulfillment. "We've come a long way," he said, wrapping his arm around Michelle's waist. Michelle leaned into him, her hand resting on her growing belly. "Yes, we have. And this is just the beginning." Gary smiled, feeling the warmth of their love and the promise of a bright future. "I can't wait to see what the future holds for us and our family." With Michelle by his side, Gary knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, their love and commitment unwavering. And for the first time in a long while, he felt truly happy and hopeful for the future.